My name is Gaston Alonso, and I am the director of the Ethel R. Wolf Institute for the Humanities at Brooklyn College. And I have to say, I am very honored and I am very excited to welcome you to today's event. This is the second in a five-part series to celebrate recent books by Brooklyn College faculty. And today we're celebrating one of my favorite colleagues, sociology professor Naomi Braine, and the book, Abortion Beyond the Law, Building a Global Feminist Movement for Self-Managed Abortion. If we could please give Professor Braine a round of applause. Now, I invite you to join us for the other upcoming book events. You can find them in the back of the program that was distributed at the Women's Center. I also want to ask those to follow, if you're online, to follow us on the Wolf Institute's social media to learn about not just the book events, but all of our upcoming programming. Now, I'm going to leave it up to the author to talk about the book. No spoilers from me. But I do have to say two things. The first thing is we have made the book available electronically for free to the Brooklyn College community. So if through the library website, you can access the book for free. And I say read it. It is a reading that is worth doing. The second thing I'm going to say is that as a student of social movements and as someone who is committed to what Professor Braine in the book refers to as, quote, a future built on justice, right? A future built on justice. This is one of the most important books I've read in a while. It really is. I was just like moved by it. I think the ways in which it shows us how to move, how to build solidarities beyond the law, beyond the state, right? How to do that in ways that allow us to claim autonomy over our bodies and our lives. That is an urgently important message at this moment. And so I want to thank Professor Braine for the book. I want to thank her for having the vision to hold this event at the Women's Center, right? And I want to thank the Center for welcoming us to their home. I think this was a brilliant choice to host the event at the Women's Center, celebrating a book that is about how community building is an act of empowerment in a place that does that every single day. So thanks to everyone at the center for hosting us, for making it possible. Thank you, Professor Braine, for gifting us this amazing book. And with that, I turn it over to you.
And thank you, Gaston, for such a wonderful introduction. We do have something of a mutual appreciation society, Gaston and I. So yes, you can see our wonderful students piling in. And in speaking about women's power and autonomy, Xiao Fang, who is the director of the Women's Center, demonstrates what it means to create space for women's power and autonomy every single day. I'm being told I need to speak louder. Okay, I do know how to project to the back of a room. These things you learn in classrooms. So yes, I just want to acknowledge Xiao Fang as the director of the Women's Center. She is a voice for justice and a voice for feminist power on this campus, often in the face of considerable lack of support. She demonstrates what it means to hold space when they are not making it easy for you. And it's part of why we are here, and it's part of why many of us are part of the Xiao Fang fan club and work with her. All right, so I want to move us forward. So in the program and in all the notices, advertising material for this, you saw the formal biographies for Sybil and Caitlin. So I want to offer a slightly more informal introduction. So Sybil is an extraordinary feminist activist and educator, and she has created a warm, welcoming, and liberatory space in the middle of Lagos that I was privileged enough to visit. And she and her staff welcomed me in 2019 when I turned up on their doorstep for a day. And I know from talking with her staff that she has employed many of her former students. And I know from being there and from everything I learned that she has a deep commitment to rights and autonomy as a collective and individual practice simultaneously. And I'm honored that she's willing to join us from Lagos in the evening when she might prefer to be relaxing and having dinner. And Caitlin, Caitlin is a friend as we have an ongoing episodic conversation about self-managed abortion, research, life, and whatever else comes up. And she is somebody who it really intrinsically deeply understands the linkages between science and politics. And having worked in public health for many years myself, I really don't take that for granted. It is an important thing to bring. All right, so I'm going to start I keep taking my glasses on and off because when I look out at the room, I want them off. But if I'm going to read my notes, I need them on. So I'm going to start by saying a few words about the research and, how I went about doing it. One can't go through an entire book in 10 minutes. I have no interest in trying. Then Sybil and Caitlin will speak a little bit about their work in the present. Because one thing about books, as everybody in this room knows who has published one, is that they are out of date about 6 months before they are released at best, right? So really, I am encouraging Sybil and Caitlin to speak about their work now, because this is not something that was trapped in time back in 2017 to 2019 when I was doing field work and follow-up interviews in 2022. And then we will talk and hopefully there will be some time for questions. All right, so I want to begin by really emphasizing that this is a movement of the global South. I may have written this book, but I wrote it because people opened their offices, their organizations, their lives, their spaces to me and welcomed me in. Self-managed abortion began in Brazil in the 1980s. When some women, somewhat in collaboration with pharmacists, realized that they could use misoprostol to induce a miscarriage in a context in which such a thing was illegal. And that also demonstrates to me the ways in which knowledge building within this movement has been grassroots from the beginning. So in the early 2000s, European telemedicine platforms, one in particular, and then a couple of others began to emerge. And the first hotline was created in Ecuador in 2008, which then spread rapidly across the globe. Asia, Indonesia in particular, sub-Saharan Africa, all of Latin America. The United States are come latelys to this. We are learning from everybody else and trying to figure out how to implement it here. And Caitlin is on this because she is one of the people who was deeply involved in validating activist protocols. And Sybil is one of the people who was involved in creating the early hotlines in sub-Saharan Africa. So I came to this from work on harm reduction around drug use and HIV. And I was introduced to this movement and to this work and to the fact of self-managed abortion by a longtime friend who was one of the small number of people who had 1 foot solidly in drug-related harm reduction and HIV, and the other foot very solidly in reproductive justice. And she hosted an extraordinary meeting in the summer of 2015 where she essentially had 5 needle exchange activists in a room with a bunch of reproductive justice activists, mostly from a couple of Latino organizations. And it was such a good experience that we all went over to her apartment afterwards for drinks instead of fleeing in the opposite direction. And I went out of there fascinated by this movement that I was learning about. I then spent 2 exploratory trips to Chile and Argentina in 2016, and then spent a little over a month in Chile in 2017. And that was before I began any research. I went there to talk with people about how could I contribute to what was going on? What would it make sense for me to do as a gringa, an outsider from the global north? How could I be a positive contribution, a positive player within this, and not an extractivist player? And what came out of those conversations was that one of the things that I could offer was to think about the movement as a transnational movement, not as what is happening in one place or another place. It was not my place to do an ethnography of one of the organizations, one of the collectives. If they wanted an ethnography done, they'd do it themselves. Thank you very much. If nothing else, there were enough graduate students in their mix that there were people who could and did. So I ended up, that was a big part of my focus, thinking about the similarities and differences in work and experience across locations, the role of networks in countries and regionally and transnationally, and technology, the things that are actually some of the things that become most visible when you are not standing in only one place and when you are talking to people in multiple places. And another thing that emerged as being extremely important during this process was thinking about the creation of knowledge. And that was much of what was being narrated to me, was the ways in which, when we spoke about networks, when I would ask how an organization got started, I would hear, well, we got the protocols from so-and-so and so-and-so. And, Salud Mujeres came and trained us. And these people came from here. And we went to a workshop at this conference here, and we heard all about this. And the ways in which, while everyone speaks about the World Health Organization protocols, as in any other setting, and those of you who want to go to medical school in this room, let me tell you, a protocol is a starting point, it's not an ending point. It comes alive in a particular context and a particular location and a particular moment. And they were learning how to use these protocols, how to bring them to life in their particular locations, how to apply them, how to share them, how to make them accessible. And this is knowledge being created from the grassroots. It is not incidental to this movement. It is central to this movement. It's one chapter in the book, but it underlies so much of the book. Another piece was about the importance of integrating activism into life, how a long-term commitment to a movement gives shape to the lives of activists, and the ways in which the long-term activists who are in it for 5 years, 10 years, now 15 years in some cases, are vital to sustaining the movement and to bringing people into it. And the ways in which the work they do is part of their day-to-day life. It's not an extraordinary thing that's off in a corner that you do one Thursday a month, right? It's part of your daily life and your daily practice. So this is some of what these became central focus points and underlying principles to the book itself. The transnational nature of it, the development of knowledge, and the centrality and importance of integrating activism into day-to-day life. And these are experiences that I feel privileged to share, and that I will now step back and invite Sybil or Caitlin. Perhaps Sybil, are you willing to speak next?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
So,
yeah. Okay.
Sybil, you have the floor.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you, Professor Braine. Thank you also for letting me be part of this launch, book launch. I appreciate it. For our activists and advocates working at the community on the ground right now. We have been involved in a research for the past 3 years on the effectiveness of self-managed abortion. And during the research over the years of close collaboration with the activists we are working with, we have each come to realize, appreciate that there are certain parts of our work on abortion that is immeasurable. So when we mention abortion, some questions come to our minds. What is human? What is life? What is death? What is liberation? So, and in a decision to assess abortion, it's a decision based on compassion. It's a decision based on rooted in compassion, in love, in self-worth, and in a belief and optimism for the future. There are ways also that we activists, advocates, we are committed to listen, to support, and not to judge the person involved. So, activists also who are working on the ground, we navigate through the restrictive environment, creating institutional and cultural changes, behavioral changes in favor of women. Activists at the community level play a key role in measuring and improving access to safe abortion. When we work together, we bring about positive change in communities. What comes to our mind to self-determination and autonomy. We think about the independent use of abortion pills, which is an act of resistance against the local system, against regulations, consciously and unconsciously. To support autonomy, activists at the community level play a key role in increasing and improving access to safe abortion. We use the following strategies. We use research, evidence-based research. We use stigma reduction sessions, and we fight oppressive attitudes and restrictive laws. And we believe that every person should have the right to information about the pills and contraceptive, because we believe it's a new science and women has the right to new science, scientific things. So based on that, we believe that every person should have access to information about the abortion pills. And to us, information is power. So in framing the arguments to support activism on the ground, we consider language and discussion about clarity of individual values, positive ideas, vision, and respect for individuals. We don't believe that women are criminals. Women or people who want to access abortion are agents of change. We believe they are moral agents of change, and they have the right to decide about their fertility. This decision must be respected because only a pregnant woman can know whether to carry a pregnancy to term and has the right to make the decision. Women should be allowed to choose the type of healthcare they want and that will be best to them in this sort of situation when they decide to safely terminate their pregnancy. And let me talk a little about Nigerian context. A quick grounding context, a reminder of the Nigerian context regarding legal abortion. Access is severely restricted. It's only legal to save a woman's life, and it requires permission of 2 doctors, a physician and a gynecologist. So the situation is there for women who in Nigeria, women and girls who want to end a pregnancy. This is especially true when the advancement of women's reproductive rights is threatened by the policies. Nigerian health service have continued to fragment, deteriorate, and decrease. As a result, more women seek for contraceptive and pregnancy alternatives outside the medical legal system. Well, stigma is manifested on multiple levels when they seek this alternative system. So based on that, through institutions, legal regulations, community and personal beliefs, and self-judgment, empowerment to fight stigma promotes women's rights and power. To give the power and authority requires trust and respect for people's autonomy and choices. So, we also continue to create knowledge about abortion in the process that take place. Like, for example, we have a hotline that gives information about self-reproductive choices, safe-abortion, contraceptives, and postpartum prevention of postpartum hemorrhage and post-abortion care. It is a resource that gives information to women to promote their health literacy. So this is a voice, international voice response technology, which Professor Braine saw when she was at our office. When a client calls, either she received the information from the IVR or directly call a counselor to receive information. We do this because we believe that it encourages equity, health equity, and empowerment, because the act of a woman picking a pill, swallowing a pill, we believe that it's an act of empowerment and bodily autonomy. So, and this hotline is, I think, is an innovation, it's a technological innovation that has, I think it has collaborated many organizations and many activists. For example, the IBIS Reproductive Health here have been using it for research for more than 4 years on the self-effectiveness of self-managed abortion and the quality of care, what type of care that the hotline gives, the quality of care. And we have realized that self-managed abortion is safe and effective. And we believe that that's my colleague that always say that misoprostol is magic. So during the COVID men who was needing contraceptives, who was needing access to abortion too. So I feel knowledge is power, and the women actually need access to information in order to access self-managed abortion. Thank you.
Thank you. I know the hotlines of Latin America have gotten far more attention in the United States than the work in sub-Saharan Africa. And so thank you, Sybil, for uplifting that this is not just a movement of Latin America, that this is a movement of the world, and that you bring a very different perspective. So thanks. And now we'll toss it to Caitlin, the science side.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Sybil. What an absolute delight to be here with both of you and to share this virtual space. It's lovely to see some of your faces. And thank you, Naomi, for the wonderful introduction. I want to give a little bit more context about me before I dive into some remarks. Just sort of as a positionality statement, so you all know where I'm coming from. So I am an epidemiologist by training, and I have studied abortion for my entire career. I came to this topic quite early on, knowing that my draw to public health itself was really about ensuring that everyone had the resources they needed and the autonomy they needed to thrive. And also recognizing that community-led approaches to research and intervention are the best way to achieve those goals. I came to abortion because abortion is an inherently intersectional topic. It's a human rights issue, a reproductive justice issue, it's a racial justice issue, it's an economic justice issue, it's a housing, immigration, and trans justice issue. I came to epidemiology, though, because I admired the rigor and methods employed. And I also realized at the time that there were alarmingly few epidemiologists studying abortion, which by definition is a topic of human health. It is core to epidemiology. And the fact is that there are still few epidemiologists today who study abortion. That is changing, and I have the distinct honor to work with some incredible activist epidemiologists at IBIS Reproductive Health, which is the research nonprofit where I work. And I imagine there may be some existing epidemiologists in the audience or budding epidemiologists. It is changing, and that is exciting. And over my career, I've continued to believe that epidemiologic approaches to study design and methods does have a lot to contribute to abortion research. But I've learned, more importantly, that in order for our research to be impactful, the way that we approach and conduct research, from the questions we ask, the way we recruit, the approach to analysis, to dissemination, it has to be done in true equitable partnership with the people and the communities who are impacted most by the topic we're studying and who know best what is happening on the ground. I certainly continue to believe that epidemiology and the methods of epidemiology can make important contributions to abortion research. But I also know that as researchers, we have to know and own our own history. We have to know that the very endeavor of research has been and continues to be a tool of oppression. We have to know that research has and does cause harm and continues to be used to extract information from rather than create information with the communities who are closest to the topics that we study. I think that we as researchers have to change that. We have to be curious and open. We have to do better. I've been enormously fortunate to work in close partnerships with Sybil and Naomi and other activists and scholar activists, grassroots feminist collectives, and even some clinicians here and in the US and around the globe who continue to push me and my colleagues to do good research in the service of collective liberation. And I want to say, building on what Sybil has said, that it's the people who support people having abortions and those people having abortions themselves who know what questions most urgently need to be answered by research. They know how to ask questions of people who have abortions and those who support them. And they also know how to contextualize and understand the data. So following that expertise, the entire research process can be fundamentally transformed into something much more powerful and much more radical. So Naomi has asked us to frame our remarks around 3 themes. She asked us to talk about the creation of knowledge about abortion, about the transnational feminist movement that she describes in the book, and about the support for bodily autonomy and self-determination as day-to-day work from our perspectives. So I will start briefly where it makes the most sense, I think, for me, which is the creation of knowledge. And before I talk about my own involvement in creating knowledge about abortion, I do just want to take a moment to appreciate and celebrate the creation of this radical and radically important book that Naomi has written. Gaston did a beautiful job of summarizing it, but even in its very title, Beyond the Law, This book helps us to understand that abortion exists as a part of daily life. It is not governed by any legal system. It is core to people's self-determination. So how do we go about creating knowledge about abortion that can contribute to the project of self-determination? For me, like I have said, research is about relationships. It's about building trust, about exchanging expertise. It's about building a collective vision with people who are closest to the topic for the creation of knowledge that will be transformational. And that's where the best questions come from. It doesn't come from sitting at your desk. It comes from being in relationship with people, from understanding what people are doing on the ground, what people need to have good abortion experiences. And questions arise from within the trusted space of those kinds of relationships. Questions that need to be answered because it will make access to abortion better or easier. Questions that need to be answered in order to improve services, whether they're within a clinical system or within a community system. Or questions that need to be answered to quiet skepticism. Sybil talked a little bit about some of the research that we have done together to document the safety and effectiveness of self-managed medication abortion with support from accompaniment groups and hotlines like Sybil's. And I will say that question was not a question that the activists actually had. They knew the answer. They knew very deeply, because of their day-to-day lived experience of supporting people to safely and effectively self-manage medication abortion with pills, that it was safe, that it was effective, and that people had good abortion experiences using both mifepristone and misoprostol in combination and misoprostol alone. They had no question about that. But they knew that the world and the systems and the structures in place had questions and were questioning the validity of the approach that they were using to transform access and to contribute to self-determination. And they also knew that working with a group of researchers who could bring a set of skills that was complementary to theirs, to be able to document in a language that is understood by global systems of power, that they could radically transform the way that the whole world saw what they were doing. And so we created a partnership to do that, not because anybody on the team had any question about what we would find, but because by documenting in a rigorous scientific way, we knew that we could present the model to the world as something valid and in line with what these global systems and structures think about as safe and effective abortion, and thereby potentially change access, improve outcomes because you expand access to this model of care. And so we developed the SAFE study together with Sybil's organization, an organization in Argentina and an organization in Southeast Asia to do that very thing. And no one was surprised when we found that, in fact, self-managed abortion with accompaniment group support was no less effective than getting medication abortion in a clinic setting. But by documenting it in that way, and putting it in a publication like the Lancet Global Health, we were able to inspire the kind of change that happens when big global systems and structures actually absorb scientific knowledge, including the WHO itself changing its recommendation around self-managed medication abortion, no longer treating it as an unsafe method, but rather including it under the umbrella of safe and effective methods and models of care. And I cannot say enough how radical it was that the activists had the vision to know that by collaborating with researchers to put the evidence that they had on paper, they had a vision for that change and they made it happen because they knew it was important in order to expand access to and change the way that people think about self-managed abortion. And now, like, the global medical standard bearer has said very clearly what they do is a safe and effective method and model of care. That is transformative. So I'll move on to just talk a little bit about what it means to be a part of this fabric of transnational feminist work in an ongoing way. And it might seem like an incongruent question to ask of a researcher and an epidemiologist nonetheless, like, how does transnational feminism guide my work? But I would argue that it's the very core of how I approach my work and how our organization approaches the work that we do. And that is to say that the interconnectedness and the understanding that in order to possess bodily autonomy, one must have access to abortion, that in order to achieve the vision of collective liberation that's embodied by the reproductive justice framework, we must truly disrupt institutional oppression. We have to challenge systems of institutional violence. And when it comes to abortion, to do so through radical solidarity and using all of the tools that we have available to us, including taking ownership of medical technologies like abortion pills and taking ownership of evidence-based protocols and putting them into the hands of people who need abortion regardless and beyond whatever the laws say. So I think research is one of those tools. It's a tool that we can use to reinforce, to iterate on, to improve, and to transform direct actions to support people who have abortions, regardless of their legal context, but especially in those contexts where people are facing criminalization. We know that abortion laws are put in place to control reproduction, to control the bodies of pregnant people, and in America especially, abortion laws are a part of the project of white supremacy. They are intended to criminalize Black and Brown communities and other communities who hold marginalized identities. Research about models of support for self-managed abortion can not only document pathways that can be used to reduce harm, not from abortion, but as Naomi has taught me, from the law, and can disrupt the underpinning of the laws themselves. As Naomi says so beautifully in her book, the movement for SMA disrupts all of it by providing information and support to enable someone to reclaim their autonomy and by standing with them so they are not alone in the process. Autonomy and self-determination can be abstract concepts and constructs, and for activists and advocates like Sybil, they are the daily work, right? But what does that look like for a researcher? And what does that look like for the creation of knowledge to incorporate autonomy and self-determination into the daily work? I will say, I think in this book, we are reminded at the beginning and at the end that this is a transnational movement of global solidarity that originated and has flourished in the global South. But of course, and increasingly, as you all in your classrooms are sitting in the US, and for me, as a white global North-based researcher who has been privileged to partner with activists like Sybil in the global South, my daily practice has to be to interrogate the ways in which the knowledge we have created together can contribute to better abortion experiences for everyone, both around the globe and here at home. I'm sure many of you have seen and watched with alarm the increasingly draconian laws criminalizing people who support those having abortions, trying to prevent people moving from state to state in order to obtain abortions, trying to roll back the federal approval of abortion drugs. These are all a part of this project to control reproduction and control bodily autonomy. But the knowledge that we have created in partnership with these activists, and the knowledge that is the knowledge and deep community expertise in communities here in the US, especially in Indigenous communities and Black communities and communities that have been historically marginalized and have been taking care of each other and helping people to get access to abortion, because even before Dobbs, access was not equal. Access did not exist for so many people, and the way in which we constructed a system of abortion access that was really grounded in the medical system and not in this understanding that abortion is beyond the law. My job, my work, our work as activist researchers is to understand what the creation of knowledge globally can contribute to the current situation in the US and around the globe to increase access, to make sure that we understand, regardless of where someone sits, regardless of what their identities are, of what geography they're in, or what country they're in, or what the laws say, how do we know what they need? How do we document ways to help support people in having the best abortion experience they can, given the context that they are in, and create the conditions for that self-determination and vision for liberation? I'll stop there.
All right. So I know there's an epidemiology class somewhere in this room. So these are things you can do with epidemiology. And I just want to sort of lift back up something that Caitlin said a few minutes ago, that the work that she and her institute, in collaboration with Sybil and with activists in Indonesia and in Argentina, changed the WHO. All right, the WHO did not change and issue its brilliance upon the world. The WHO was changed by the work of community-based grassroots activists in the global South, working in collaboration with a research institute, right? So this is feminist activism, feminist science, feminist knowledge development, and transnational activism all wrapped up into a ball, right? Into a particular moment. I have questions to help us get started, and we could talk to each other, but I want to pause for a moment. And, I'm sitting here with, 30 or more students in front of me. So do some of you have questions or thoughts that you would like to share, that you would like to bring up? What would you like to know about what it is to run a feminist organization in Lagos? What would you like, or what, at least Gawain, the one that Sybil knows best? Is there something you'd like to know about being a feminist epidemiologist? So do you have questions? Yes, in the back. All right, so Sybil, I don't know if you heard that. She's curious. It's a very pragmatic question about how Gawain is funded and whether or not you're able to pay your staff, which is a key issue in a lot of US organizations.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. It's a very important question. So we have how we are funded. There are organizations that have partnered with us. For example, EB's Reproductive Health. They fund us to enable us to do the research. And as they are funding, they are paying the staff that are working on that research. Then we have other funders from the UK, for example, Amplify Change. They are working on abortion advocacy, and they have funded us for 8 years. Then IBIS have funded us for 5 years. So there are other ones too, Safe Abortion Action Fund from UK. Recently, very recently, First Feminista in US. These are organizations that have been funding us in different capacities. So when they fund the organization in the projects, they will fund strengthen the organization as well as pay the staff that are working on the projects. So that's how we generate the funds. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is one of the interesting differences in different parts of the world, is to what extent this movement is based in NGOs that are able to pay their staff, and to what extent it is collective, which are mostly volunteer. And certainly in sub-Saharan Africa, my understanding is that it is primarily NGOs, and it is able to provide a living wage and a lot to support the lives of the staff. Other questions?
Hey, I have a question, Khalifa.
Okay.
All right, great.
I can't see
sorry.
who you. I can't see who. Oh, there you are. Hi, Khalifa.
Hi. Okay. All right. I'm good. I can ask my question now.
Yes, go ahead. Ask your question.
All right. So I'm curious, how does the role of feminist epidemiologists differ from that of traditional epidemiologists, and what unique perspectives or methodologies, I guess, do they bring in the field addressing public health challenges, particular those related to gender inequalities, reproductive health?
All right.
It's a great question. And I think I'll start by saying that there's a specific kind of training that we get in public health. I mean, maybe research generally, where researchers are, taught that our role is to be objective and to document with fidelity whatever it is that we are studying, and, to remove biases, you have to have objective researchers present. And I think in my evolution to what I would call an activist, an approach to activist epidemiology or feminist epidemiology, I think you have to come to the understanding that we all are biased. There is no such thing as objectivity. And the idea that objectivity would be placed in what has been traditionally a very white, very global North-centric endeavor, the endeavor of research, is in and of itself deeply problematic, racist, and harmful. And so I think, unlearning a lot of the things that you're taught in grad school is the first project of becoming an activist researcher, which is not to say that some of the methods and some of the approaches cannot be useful. Sure, they can. But I still believe that, when you're doing a data analysis, the approach that epidemiologists take is a good one. But using those approaches, designing studies, using epidemiologic methods to even think about the questions, has to be done in collaboration with communities. I'll use the example of when we were designing the SAFE study instrument. And, our team of epidemiologists, who has an extensive knowledge of all of the abortion research that has happened previously, came up with an instrument. We were going to have a big team meeting. We were going to run it by all of the different groups who are our co-PIs and try to come up with something. And there were a core set of questions that we sort of thought, well, these are the things that we have to ask. These are the things that are easy. You know, we won't spend too much time on that. We'll move on to some of the bigger questions that haven't been asked and figure out how everybody wants to ask them. I mean, we spent an entire day, didn't we, Sybil, just going through that instrument. And some of the questions that we thought would be the easiest, our activist partners challenged us to think like, why are you asking about education as a proxy for what? As a proxy for income, as a proxy for, like, why do you need this question? Why are you asking questions about contraceptive use? I don't care whether people are using contraception. That's not a part of their abortion experience. I'm not going to ask them if they want to talk about contraception until after they have had an abortion. And some of our groups refuse to talk about it at all. Like some of the core things that we as researchers thought, oh, this is just the standard stuff. Our assumptions were challenged, and there is nothing better than having your assumptions challenged to creating a stronger, better study, instrument, analysis, and dissemination plan, because if you ask questions that are relevant to the lives of the people who you're actually talking to, then the information that you get will actually be able to have an impact for them. And that's who the research has to be done for. And I think that's the difference, right? It's about who you're doing the research for and why. I don't, as Sybil knows, care so much about putting our research in a publication as I do about what Sybil will do with the information that she has gathered about the people she's serving, about, you know, the services that they're offering and how to make them better. Once that is in place, if there's a need or a desire from the team to put it in a publication, great. But it's hard. I mean, especially in academia where publications are your currency, it's hard to navigate that. And so I think I hope that there is some transformation of, you know, what the way that academics and researchers are able to think about producing results and what matters. But that to me is sort of the biggest difference, like who we're doing this for and why.
So
Got it. Thank you.
There's two other questions. I wanted to briefly ask Sybil, is there something you would like to say to a student who is curious about feminist epidemiology and what that means? Is there something that you would like to share from your experience and perspective with Khalifa and with everybody else who's here? Okay. So there was a question on the couch. Medical. Okay. So the question that has been asked by one of the students in the room that I think is particularly interesting, I might invite you to engage with it to get us started with this, is about the role of cultural norms and medical literacy, or the lack of medical literacy, in doing this work among the women who call the hotline, for example. How do you negotiate these questions of cultural norms and what people know about their bodies and medicine when they call?
Thank you very much. First of all, the hotline is a multilingual hotline. It is in 3 languages, the 2 Nigerian languages, and English. So concerning literacy, if the person cannot hear English language, because there are a lot of non-literate or less literate people around, if they cannot hear English, then we speak in Igbo language or Yoruba language. So, and the information we give them is built on trust. by showing empathy, listening and supporting them. And we believe just the whole thing is based on trust. When we give them information, they trust us that the information we have given them is true. And for cultural norms, yes, some culturally they don't believe in abortion. They said abortion is sin, and they come to seek information. We gradually lead them to know that this is science and they have freedom. We have freedom of information, and when giving this information, it will empower them. The act of taking a decision, the act of taking a pill, where when they even going to the pharmacy to, we don't advise them. We give them information. So when they go for security reasons, so when they go to the pharmacy to access the pills, we actually, because if they just go to the pharmacy and say, we want to take misoprostol or mifeprostol is not sold in the pharmacy in Nigeria. It's only administered under the medical practitioner. So when they go to access misoprostol, and the person may say, are you using it for abortion? I will not give you. So what we do is to tell them what to say, what other women have been saying, and they have been going through it. There are misoprostol can serve other medical issues, like for postpartum hemorrhage, like for arthritis. So they can say other things in order to get their pills. Then another thing, cultural norms, we use music and art. The protocol, the safe abortion protocol, we put it into music. We sing and dance, and they sing and dance. By that, to promote acceptability. By that, they accept it, because in our setting, we use music to promote culture, to save information, even if the person does not understand what is being said, for the fact that he has heard the sound of the music, she will dance and accept it. That is how we counter the culture of non-acceptability.
Right. Thank you. And there is there's at least one reggaeton that beats out the basic instructions, and I understand there are a few other that, yes, that Sybil's crew at Gawine are not the only ones who have put the protocol into music. So I know that it is 2:00 and our speakers may have places they need to be, and I know that students are getting restless. Your class is just about over. You're getting restless. So we do have, yes. Okay, so what is this? Someone has raised their hand. Yes, Alia has. So there is another question from the online. If you're, Sybil and Caitlin, if you're willing to take another question. All right, Alia.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies. And sir, how are you? I have a comment and a question. I wanted to thank you, Professor Bryce, for highlighting the important works of the doctors Caitlin and Sybil that they've done, and forcing the World Health Organization to recognize medical abortions. I'm just being educated that it was grassroots initiative in collaboration with research that caused this. So I guess we are fortunate to have some pioneers on the panel, and I want to thank you ladies for the work, and Professor Bryce for highlighting it, and for your contributions as well. And I wanted to know, you said earlier, Professor Bryce, coming to Chile as a gringa. I want to know about that. Like, I would imagine, just, and I'm imagining that you have to gain the trust of the community you're going to work with, and they may not be receptive just from, being an outsider. And how you dealt with that, and how Sybil also, I'm sorry, not Sybil, Dr. Caitlin deals with it. And I wanted to know if Dr. Sybil ever encountered any type of physical violence. Here in the States, at some points we would see protests around abortion clinics turn violent. And I know in Nigeria, I'm assuming that, the culture is not that receptive and open to abortions. Have you encountered any safety issues yourself in advocating for these women, any of you for that matter? And, logistically, how do you guys manage that on a day-to-day? Or is it something that is just initial and then it kind of fades away, these threats?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So,
Thank
Sybil,
you.
would you like to start with that? Yes, please. Sybil, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Alia. We have actually faced violence, but we have safety measures. We are trained in safety. We are trained in safety measures. So whatever we want to do, we take safety measures. But there is a time we do holistic security training severally, even with EB's reproductive health. They train us on holistic security, so that whatever we do, we put security first. But despite this, there was a time a doctor was arrested in one organization, I think Barrier Stoops Clinic, and he was arrested by the police that he's doing abortion and all that. So based on that, everybody became afraid, including ourselves. What we do is to dislodge the hotline, in fact, lock our office and take few security measures. From time to time, people come to our office and say, we want to do this. Well, they start taking pictures. So immediately we see that, we know that these are the wrong people. Or so that, especially since the US, during US rollback of reproductive rights before the first president. So it means it gave leverage to anti-abortion movement. They were everywhere. So, but we keep on our security measures, give information, putting security measures first, because we don't advise, we give information to the person. We tell the person what other women have done and succeeded. So even when we are doing our research, we keep the security measures up to this step. Though police have arrested our staff somewhere in Ghana, we sent a lawyer there, and we dislodged the hotline, remove it from the office, remove all materials that is connected with abortion, and then lock our office for a few days until they are released.
This makes me admire you and appreciate your work more, because it's not what we reading about that happened some time ago. You are doing this work right now, today. So it's very heroic of you all. So thank you very much. Mhm.
Yes, security is a huge issue within this work and this movement. And I have to say the United States is even before, but as Sybil pointed out, it has gotten worse since the Dobbs decision globally. And the US funds much of the global anti-abortion right. The money comes out of our country. So I want to say a couple of quick things in response to Alia's other question about how do you do this? How do you do this research from outside? And I prioritized, and I know that Caitlin's team has also, we prioritize relationship building. So I was in Chile twice before I ever asked anybody an interview. Before I had my first interview, I was there twice. I was talking with people. I was in Argentina once. I was doing a lot of work with one of the international networks, Women Help Women, with their staff who are throughout the region. And, just to give a shout out to somebody by name, even though Caitlin may be the only other person here who knows, or maybe Sybil does. If Sarah Larea had not worked her phone and said, you can trust Naomi, it would have been much harder and taken much longer and might never have happened. But, somebody who was one of the founders of the Ecuadorian hotline, essentially was willing to back me and to say it's safe to talk to her. I also talked an awful lot about my work in needle exchange. Most of those conversations that I had, or many of them, included some discussion of my experience of standing on street corners handing out needles, which is something I did in the early 90s. And that helped activists believe that I might understand what they were experiencing. So yeah, Marvel Comics.
Did you guys touch on like pathology? Or was it just mainly focused on
Okay, so the question was whether it was medication abortion only or whether there's also been some dealing with herbs.
Yeah.
So I was working with activists. I was learning from activists who were very focused on medication abortion. I do know that there are networks in the United States of people who do work with both medication and with herbs. And what I've heard from them is that herbs require a different level of self-knowledge on the part of the person who is doing it. And the truth is that the medication abortion, you have a half page or a page of instructions and you can do it. And I see there's a small person behind Caitlin.
I have a sick kid at home.
Oh. So, Caitlin, I don't think IBIS has done any research with herbs. Have you?
I think it's a really important question and distinction. And Naomi, I appreciate the sort of historical reference. Certainly there are groups who, yes, sort of professional herbalists who provide some herbal and some medication and some combinations. There is also like a deep-rooted, centuries-old history in Indigenous communities across the world, in Black communities here in the United States, of use of herbs and teas and tinctures for the purposes of abortion. And I think what is true is that there has not been a academic documentation of those practices. And to the extent that they are very much community-based, passed down in knowledge and experience, I don't know that there ever will be. I think the point that Naomi made about, certainly the work that we have done with the accompaniment groups and sort of the radical transformation of medication abortion allowed that sort of very simple protocol, something that anyone can use and have access to if you have access to the medications. The thing that I want to say is that that's not how everybody wants to have an abortion. And it's not going to work for everybody, but where it is available and accessible, it can be transformative because of the simplicity and because of the effectiveness. That's not to say that that's the vision of the world that we necessarily want to see. I think the vision of the world that we want to see is a vision where everyone gets the kind of abortion care using whatever method they would prefer to use, and that it doesn't matter what the law says, there's an infrastructure of support for that, whatever that model of care is. And so I think there's a both and. I think we can talk about the incredible revolutionary impact of medication abortion, increasing safety and effectiveness because it is universal and it can be accessible and it can be used by anyone. And also acknowledge the importance and history of different methods of community support that might be the way that some people would like to have their abortions, that, you know, so often get criminalized and so often get pushed to the sidelines. And certainly that the sort of academic documentation is not available for, which doesn't mean that there isn't great expertise.
Actually, on Friday, I did a book talk at a bookstore with a doula who does both medication and herbal abortion. So it is in the United States. So I'm very aware that it's about 2:15 here. I think that means it's 8 or 9:15 where Sybil is. And you know, that Caitlin has somebody behind her who is wandering around aimlessly. So I think I'm gonna wrap the Zoom part of this up and just express my deep appreciation to Sybil and Caitlin for taking the time. And you know, when I was in Gawine in 2019, Sybil and I, before I left, I don't know if you remember this, Sybil, we had a brief conversation. This was just before COVID. You had been saying, oh, you might be in New York City for a meeting, which of course everything got canceled because of COVID, and that you might come, and we talked about the possibility of you coming and talking to my students. So now, 4 years later, I have had the privilege of being able to introduce you to some students at my wonderful university. So thank you. Yes, thank you both enormously. And Khalifa, we will find some time to talk about feminist epidemiology. There's at least one more question from Khalifa in the chat, but there will be time for that.
Thanks.
All right. So have a lovely evening, Sybil and Caitlin. This is the beginning of your day, but thank you so much.
Thank you all. It was so lovely to be with you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah.